Good evening. In accordance with Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20, the open session portion of this meeting will be held remotely in an online conference mode hosted on zoom.com, and members of the public will not be able to physically attend. The meeting will be broadcast live on Comcast Channel 12. It can also be viewed via live stream at whca.tv and will subsequently be broadcast on youtube.com. If we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
to the flag
of the
of the
United
United
States
States of America,
and to the
to the
republic
republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God,
God, indivisible,
with
with
liberty and justice for all.
We'll open the meeting with a moment of silence. Like a motion to approve bill and payroll warrants.
So moved, Dan.
Second, Brian.
Is there any discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Justin,
Yes.
Randy,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. I'd like a motion to accept correspondence in the read file.
Motion, Dan.
Second, Brian.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, roll call. Dan,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Randy,
Yes.
Justin,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. You'll note that on your agenda at 7:30, we had scheduled a public hearing pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 140, Section 157, and Whitman's Dog Control Regulation 27, Section 11, with respect to a dog complaint, commonly called a dog hearing. We have been asked by one of the parties to postpone that meeting, and both parties agreed to postpone it until June 8th. So we will hold that dog hearing on June 8th. And I think what and because of what's been going on as far as COVID is concerned, it's very likely that June 8th may be able to be our first in-person meeting, a meeting that's not held on Zoom. And that would work out well, I think, for a hearing of that nature, to have everybody in the room at the same time.
Kyle, do we need a motion to table that?
Well, why don't we do it? You can make a motion to postpone it until June 8th.
I'll make that motion.
One of the parties.
Second. I'll second that.
Okay, any discussion? Justin,
Yes.
Randy,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Dan, and I'll
Yes.
vote. Under new business, a consideration of recommendation for fire chief appointment. Would you like to introduce this topic, Lincoln?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So after discussion with several folks about the process, and there is a civil service, obviously the Whitman Fire Department is part of the civil service process. Not only is the candidate before you this evening, Lieutenant Tim Clancy, at the top of the list, I'd just like to very briefly say, I think he's also certainly the best candidate for the position. He is on the call as well, and it looks like he's popping up now. So I know he's available to answer questions from the board as the board desires, but just briefly, I'll just very quickly go through three areas of his expertise and background that I think are particularly impressive. He's been a member of the Whitman Fire Department for the first 6 years as a call firefighter, but a member overall for 30 years. Since 2008, he has been a lieutenant. He's worked his way up at full-time from being firefighter to lieutenant. So certainly is committed to the town and committed to the department. I'd also say, he's absolutely committed himself to furthering himself in the field and education-wise. He's gone to the National Fire Academy in Maryland several times. He's due to go there again, regardless, of his possible appointment as chief next month, and has done a lot of training there. He's achieved his Master of Arts in Fire Science and Administration from Anna Maria College, and then I think finally, he's certainly shown his commitment to furthering others in the field. So he has been an EMS educator. He's taught as an fire instructor at the Massachusetts Fire Academy. And I think all these pieces together, his background in Whitman, his commitment to educating himself and to his commitment to educating others and leading others, I would strongly recommend his appointment as the next chief.
And that would be effective
So that would be effective at 5:01 p.m. on July 9th. The Chief Greno's retirement is effective at 5 p.m. on July 9th. So the next appointment would be effective at 5:01 p.m. on that day.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion to appoint Tim Clancy to the position of Fire Chief in Whitman, effective at 5:01 on July 9th, based
I will
upon
make that motion.
on the recommendations of the town administrator and civil service? Yes, Lincoln.
If I could just recommend that motion be amended in a friendly way, just have it be subject to contract negotiations with Lieutenant Clancy.
Very, very good. Thank you.
So amended.
I'll second that.
Okay, the motion has been made a motion and it's been seconded. Is there any discussion? I think I'd like to hear from Chief Greno and sort of introduce the new chief to us,
Be happy to, Mr. Chairman.
even before.
Yes. Good evening, everyone.
And the vote is not going to have anything to do with what you have to say, Tim.
Good evening, everybody. It's great to see everybody. I wish this could be in person. You have before you this evening Tim Clancy. As with the requirements of being fire chief in Whitman, your first name must be Tim or Timothy, from Tim Travis to myself to now Tim Clancy. Tim was born and raised in Whitman. He lives in Whitman with his wife, Danielle, and their daughter, Kylie. Tim is a Whitman Hanson graduate. Lincoln has pretty thoroughly gone through his accolades. But what I want to also comment to you that, he was appointed in 1991 as a call firefighter. He was appointed a fire lieutenant in 2008. He's currently the department fire training officer. He's currently an instructor at the Mass Fire Academy. He, as Lincoln said, he holds a master's degree in fire science. He's a certified fire officer at all three levels 1, 2, and 3. He's a certified fire instructor at both levels, level 1 and 2. He's a graduate of the Mass Fire Academy Edward J. Collins Center for Public Management Fire Chief Officer Program from a few years ago. The Fire Chiefs Association of Massachusetts pushed extremely hard several years ago for credentialing status of fire chiefs in Massachusetts. That system was put in place. He is also credentialed through the Massachusetts Fire Training Commission or Fire Service Commission as a fire chief in Massachusetts. He meets those requirements. As Lincoln said, he is currently enrolled in the Executive Fire Officer Program at the National Fire Academy, which is the top program in the fire service for fire officer and fire leadership. When I took over in 2008, one of my main objectives was to ensure that my command staff received the education and training required to perform their jobs. In small towns such as Whitman, a chief needs to be able to count on their shift commanders as if they were a battalion chief. When the chief is out of town in Whitman, the shift commander, they are the decision maker. And having competent officers in place assures the safety of not only our members, but the 15,000 plus residents that we're here to assure their safety. Lieutenant Clancy has never stopped his education or training. He continues to make himself better and strives to excel in every aspect of his job. And because of that, he has made my tenure as fire chief much easier. Just a little history of Lieutenant Clancy. For several years, Tim and I were the only two paramedics in town. Back in 1995, 1996-ish, we obtained our advanced life support license to run one paramedic staffed ambulance. And that truck was staffed between Tim and I for probably 2 years, back and forth, like covering whatever was going on in town. Tim spent many nights molding and building our EMS system with me to what it is today. His dedication and his commitment to this community goes back over 2 decades and is very strong and very admirable. So as you know, the chief exam was conducted in November of 2020 with a written exam, and the candidates then completed a full day assessment center a little over probably a month ago. And as we generally see, those with credentials such as Lieutenant Clancy's excel in both the written and the assessment centers portion of those exams. We historically see the most qualified candidate come out top of these exams, assuring the town has the right candidate. So this evening, Mr. Chairman and honorable board members, I'm very honored to let you know what you already know, that Lieutenant Clancy has topped that, and I personally wholly recommend him for the position of fire chief.
Thank you very much, Chief. You know what?
That's what I have.
Before we speak to Lieutenant Clancy, I would like to have the vote. We've had it recommended by our town administrator and by the chief. Obviously recommended by Civil Service with its ranking. And I'd like to call for the vote now so that when we speak to Lieutenant Clancy, he will be Chief Clancy in waiting while we talk to him. Like to do this by roll call. Justin
Yes.
and Randy,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. Congratulations, Chief Clancy. And would you like to say anything?
Thank you, sir. I'd just like to address the board briefly tonight. To Chief Greno and Town Administrator Hyman, thank you very much for the recommendations. It's very much appreciated. Chief Greno, we've been through a lot. This is just kind of the next step. So they kind of gave you everything that I was going to give right off the bat about my background and history, but I have been a member since I was a senior in high school in 1991. 97, I became a full-time firefighter. One of the first paramedics hired along with Chief Greno. We molded the system, which I'm very proud of to this day. The members do a great job. They take great care of people, and we should be proud to have that department taking care of our family members and people that visit the town. Whitman Fire has a great stoic history. We worked with a lot of great members over the years. I've been fortunate to work with a lot of great members over the years, and they've all shared with us knowledge and experience that we've been able to take forward. Most fortunately, we've been under the leadership of Chief Travers and Chief Greno, the last two fire chiefs, and the only two fire chiefs I've worked for. They've led us to be proactive and proficient. They've prepared us to do our jobs. They prepared us to meet the needs of the community. If you had told us 30 years ago that we were going to face a worldwide pandemic and we were going to have to step up to address it, nobody would have believed you. But with the planning and preparation, we were prepared to bring forward through Whitman Emergency Management, the Board of Health, and the state to bring through those shot clinics and deliver the services to town people. My plan will be to continue on that leadership and prepare the department for the future. Prepare them for any emergencies we may face. And just like the succession plan Chief Greno had with us, fostering and mentoring us, to continue that. We need to keep making the membership better so that in the future, Whitman Fire will still remain the great department that it is. We are fortunate to have the members we do. They take great pride in their work. If any of the people watching have used our services, they do a nice job, whether it's fire, EMS, or other hazard. They do a nice job. I'm proud of them. I'm proud to be a member of this department. And in conclusion, I will focus on preparing for the future, the safety of the citizens of the town of Whitman, the membership of the department and visitors to the town, and maintain that highest level of delivery of services possible, and to keep us providing the services that the town knows and expects. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. What I would like to do, Lincoln, is to make sure that even though Chief is going to become officially the chief at 5:01 on July 9th, that sometime between now and then, we also set aside some time for formal swearing in. His family can
Yes.
hear and
Absolutely.
make a little bit of a ceremony out of it so that people can enjoy that. So we'll be planning that for that first second week in July. Does anyone have any comments or questions you'd like to offer Chief Clancy right now? Okay.
No,
Chief-
good.
Yes, Dan, did you have your hand?
No, I said Randy looked like he had a question.
Randy?
Just to some firsthand attaboys for our new chief and the amazing EMS service that we do have here in town. I did suffer from a bout of kidney stones one evening, and I will say, Chief Clancy basically saved my life that night. Not only saved my life, but tied my shoes when he had to pick me up off the floor. And I know not only he would do it, but I can say every member of this department would do it. And we have a great fire department, fantastic outgoing chief. Chief before that was fantastic. And I know thoroughly that the Whitman Fire Department is in good hands going forward. And I can't say enough good things about the outgoing chief and our soon-to-be new chief.
Okay, thank you, Randy. Anyone else like to say something? Brian?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go on that too. I mean, the fire department has been to my house twice. Once when I had a light go out because of my cat. Remember that, Tim?
Mhm.
Yep.
The cat spray, right? And it smoked out the plug, and they had to come on and clean up the house and get the smoke out. And another time when I did a very foolish thing and fell down my steps, and they had to take me in an ambulance to the hospital, and they were just so professional. You can't say enough for our department. We're probably one of the best departments on the South Shore. I couldn't say anything more about them. They're just outstanding.
Yes, and Brian, you wanted to say something also?
Yeah, I just would like to say that the fire services has never come to my house, and I certainly hope that that would continue as we live in this town. And I want to congratulate Chief-elect Clancy. I wish you all the best. You have my full support as long as I'm here. And I would certainly like to congratulate Chief Breno on his pending retirement. And from a certain grateful community, thank you for getting us through this pandemic, because it
Oh, yes.
was the fire department as well as the Board of Health that helped us along the way. They gave us great guidance, and we couldn't be in the position we're in without your leadership. So thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, Justin, jump in, Justin.
I better say something since I'm the liaison of the fire department. It's really it's been a pleasure working with Chief Greno for the last year in this role and 2 years as a member of the board. And Chief Clancy, I look forward to working closely with you. Many of you know that my father is a paramedic in Weymouth. He speaks very highly of the Whitman department, although I don't know if I'd say the best in the South Shore, because I'd get in trouble at home for that one. And my mother's a nurse up at South Shore. She was in the ER for 20 years. So obviously think very highly of our emergency services and look forward to the future. They've been set up very well, and see where we can go from here.
And I'll just say something else. Go ahead, Tim. Chief.
That's okay. I'll go ahead and I just wanted to explain to you real briefly what the transition process is. So go ahead and I could follow up in the end.
Okay, I just want to chime in too. Our family has had its visits by the fire department also, and I'd echo exactly what Dan and Randy have said. I also had the fortune from working at Massasoit all those years, it has the first step towards degrees in fire science. I've had the fortune of teaching a number of people on the force, and I've greatly enjoyed it. And as people probably know, or tired of hearing. A long time ago, my great uncle, Bert Dyer, was the fire chief in Whitman in the 20s. And so I have this kind of emotional attachment to Whitman Fire as well. I know that the Chief Clancy is going to do a terrific job, and I wish you all the best of luck. And now we'll hear from Chief Greno about his transition plans.
So I just wanted to update the board. Thank you all for all of the kind words. We didn't do it alone. It took an army, and that's what our department is. And they did a fabulous job, like throughout this entire pandemic and my 13 years as their fire chief. What's going to happen now is on June 1st, Mr. Clancy will come days. So he will be working a day shift rotation for pretty much the entire month of June until he leaves and goes to the National Fire Academy. So he'll be working with me in the office, and that'll be our transition period. Bill, payroll, operations, policies, all that fun stuff. So I would expect a seamless transition. Just a flip of, I think it'll just be a flip of a switch for you guys.
The old flip of the switch. Okay, thank you very much, Chief, and thank you. Next to be Chief.
Thank you very much, Board.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Town Administrator and the Board. I look forward to working with you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Very good.
The next item on the agenda is to hear from our Finance Committee Chairman, Rick Anderson, who,
I'm moving him in right now.
okay,
If I can just interrupt,
go ahead, Randy.
Chairman, I've gotten a couple text messages. I believe there's something wrong with the video. I don't know if Eric's still on, that we don't have.
Should be all squared away.
It should be squared away, okay.
Okay, thanks, Randy.
Oh, yeah, Laurie sent it, yeah.
Okay, I should be watching my phone, I guess. Rick.
Hey,
Rick,
good evening. Welcome. Thank you for
Okay.
having me, Mr. Chairman.
I
The reason-
understand you want to give us a report on the Finance Committee's work on the budget.
That is correct. Yep. I appreciate the opportunity to be here a couple of weeks before town meeting. Just to kind of review the Finance Committee recommendations as they were voted. We finished up last night, and just to follow up on a concern, a little bit about the format. So as you requested, Mr. Chairman, I did ask the town administrator to forward to the selectmen the working copies of the documents that were used, the warrant and the Article 2 budget lines. So the Finance Committee has voted final recommendations on all lines in the 74-page detail, the same way we always have, page by page. I asked the board to identify lines for discussion by questioning the lines. We then voted the unquestioned lines by concurring with the dollar amount proposed by the town administrator and subsequently voted by the Board of Selectmen. So just as a housekeeping matter, there were some adjustments to specific lines following our initial review, which also required reconsideration at our meeting last night. So generally speaking, the Finance Committee concurs with the articles contained within the warrant, and with less than $10,000, the 74-page Article 2 lines on this $42.4 million budget. So with respect to the chair, I'd ask if we could put up a copy of the budget detail so I can make my best attempt to identify the reasoning for the few instances where the recommendations are different from the lines voted by this board at your last meeting. So Lincoln, is it possible for you to share a copy of the working document we used last night? Sorry to put you on the spot. I am not one that is capable of sharing documents, as most of you know.
Okay, Rick, what's puzzling me is I think you just said that out of a $40 million budget, there's $9,000 difference between our recommendations and the Finance Committee's?
That is correct, yes.
And as I understand it, that all revolves around one item. that you typically in
More or
agreement-
less, yeah. Yep.
More or less, you're in agreement except for one item, which is.
That is correct.
Which is the busing item, non-mandated busing. Is that correct?
That is correct, yep. So,
Okay. So
so.
why don't we
the
talk
board-
about that? Why don't we talk about that rather than to go through all of the other ones that you discussed and then ended up agreeing with us on?
Okay. So with respect to that non-mandated busing line, it was made at the meeting last night to level fund that particular line.
Mhm.
I think a lot of the discussion centered around the joint meeting that we, members of the Finance Committee and members of the Board of Selectmen attended at the Whitman Hanson Regional High School I believe it was last month. And there were, there was some very good conversation regarding, the situation that the towns find themselves in with limited resources. And a commitment was put forward for the district to identify ways to consolidate certain busing routes, to possibly identify students who no longer will be taking the bus, and in an effort to save some money on that non-mandated busing line. So it was the board's contention at the Finance Committee last night to level fund that particular line within the Article 2. So I did have a conversation with Superintendent Simonak today, just to let him know that that was the action that the board had taken. So, like I said, very little difference between the the presentations that were provided by the town administrator, the recommendations, and like I said, the subsequent vote of the Board of Selectmen. So again, that's really I guess the main difference between what the recommendations were as they were presented and how they were voted.
Okay,
So-
does anyone have, let's focus on the busing issue, because that's the only issue apparently that we disagree on ultimately. And I know at the beginning of this process, Rick, you had said that what you hoped we could do is come up with both the selectmen and the finance committee concurred on, and at 99.9% that happened, which is terrific. What I would like to do is to ask the members of the board if they have any questions about the busing issue, to see if some kind of movement could be made there or not, as far as that issue is concerned. Anyone have anything they'd like to ask or say?
I have a question,
Justin?
if I may. Kyle, I have a question.
I saw Justin's hand first. I'm sorry.
I'm
Dan.
sorry.
That's all right.
I'm
I
sorry.
just wanted to ask
Justin.
Rick, was it the sort of the aim of the committee to get the school committee and superintendent to revisit that item to try to do some cost savings, or was it to more of a statement to shift that cost somewhere else?
Well, I wasn't the individual who made the motion. The discussion centered around the recognition of the fact that the Board of Selectmen obviously here is recognized as the policymaker. I know initial discussions about non-mandated busing included, recommendations for pay to ride and all of that. We want to get very clear that this recommendation by the Finance Committee is strictly regarding the financial implications of this line and the fact that it's reached a point where it's not sustainable. So that just following up on the meeting that we had, it was, again, a commitment on the district's part to revisit the calculations and the bus routes and that type of thing to identify some saving. So that was really the main focus of the discussion, and it lasted quite a while, so. Okay. So again, this is something obviously we've talked about for a while. Again, we want to make it clear that we're focused solely on the budget implications to this line. So thank you for your question, Justin.
Okay. Dan?
Yes, Rick, as I understand it, as it used to be, that first of all, the school has a contract with the bus company. And whether or not the bus company is going to lower that number to the schools for us to be, paid less. But is it true? I don't know if it's true or false that regardless of how many empty seats on a bus, there needs to require a seat for every student that's eligible for non-mandated busing. And that's the reason why they've been having so many empty seats. I don't know if that's still true today as it was in the past.
Yeah, I can't speak to, how specifically the bus routes are determined or the calculations are made for the specific costs of how they do negotiate the contract. All that I am promoting here is the fact that we have a line within our budget that is not sustainable. And the school district has made a commitment to identify cost savings. And really, this is more or less an opportunity for us to work with them, with the town administrator, to see if there is a way that we could, make some progress in cutting costs to this
Okay.
line.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, anyone else? Randy?
To the board, I was actually in that busing meeting, and what I will say is busing is definitely something that I think that everybody, especially when it came to non-mandated busing, that I think a majority of the people that were in that meeting realized more attention definitely need to be paid to it. And I will say, yes, we did get that commitment from Jeff to look into it. However, I've watched that meeting from last night, and I just don't know if this is just an arbitrary cut. And where has any recognition from the school department come from yet? Or is this more just a statement from the finance committee? It seems arbitrary to me, with little science behind the dollar amount of what's being cut. So I have concerns with it that we cut this, but it still gets paid for some other way, whether it's paid out of E&D or folded into the budget. But I don't know, to follow up on Dan's question, is we haven't identified reduction yet, but yet we're cutting funds. And I would hate to see that a cut of funds for this be taking out of a curriculum or the education portion that we're locked into a bus contract. So that would be the part that
Right.
rob Peter to pay Paul. Although I am in 100% agreement that this non-mandated busing, and I've spoken about it, I am a proponent for non-mandated busing, but it was clear that yes, something needs to be looked into, but I thought the looking into was going to come as they determine bus routes for the following year, which I don't believe has been done yet.
I certainly understand and respect Selectman Lamartina's concern about where the money will come from. Would it need to be supplemented? From my understanding, the busing contract is to be negotiated this year. So the only opportunity that the town has really to modify or allow the taxpayers some relief on this line is at town meeting, is now. So I think that was what really was the major impetus for the recommendation that this line be level funded. So with regard to the dollar figure, Selectman Lamartina, the number that was floated out at that meeting, I don't know if you recall, but there was some discussion that it could be in the neighborhood of $60,000 if in fact a comprehensive review of the bus routes identified ways to cut down on routes. And the big thing was for identifying ridership. And I don't really think from the discussion I, remember from that meeting that there's been a really concerted effort by the district to follow up on parents who I can definitely say that they no longer need to avail themselves to a bus, or their students need to avail themselves of a bus. So I think that's where a lot of the savings can come from. So again, I don't think we're trying to send a message. We are really trying to look into this, and this is really the only time I think that we have to look microscope at this line and look for some ways that it can be sustainable for the future.
Okay. Thank you, Rick. Lincoln, do you have any thoughts on this matter?
No, I don't think anything further that hasn't already been discussed. I have to say, I know the Board of Selectmen obviously has taken a previous vote in support of this line item and the full funding of this line item in support of busing, but obviously the board can change its mind. But I just remind the board of that discussion and vote.
Okay, is there anyone on the board that would like to amend the board's support of non-mandated busing, or are we willing to go along with our original assessment of the situation?
Just a quick question for Lincoln. Lincoln, the amount that we have proposed is the requested by the department, right? By the school district?
That is correct.
Okay,
Okay. If I may,
Okay.
Carl. All right, we get up at town meeting, the amount that's going to be read will be the lesser amount. And then somebody from the school is going to get up and talk about the reason why it should be the higher amount. Town meeting is going to make the decision. It's that simple. I mean,
Well, actually, Dan, I think you might have it backwards. I think what's presented to the town is the amount that has been proposed by the selectmen.
no,
The finance committee just recommends against that. And then the town votes. They can vote to amend it based upon the recommendation of the finance committee, or they can accept the selectmen's proposition.
I think the process is that the moderator reads the finance committee's recommended number. If it's higher or even lower than the requested number. I could be wrong. Rick can answer it. That's the way it used to be.
Rick?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this was part of the concern that I alluded to earlier in my opening comments. Historically, the town meeting is given the recommendations of the finance committee to consider for voting. If in fact there was another number, as you suggest, that the school committee feels strongly that this $10,000 is going to break the bank, they can certainly stand up. Of course, they'll be in their home court and have home court advantage in the field at the Whitman Hanson Regional High School and make a recommendation to amend. I mean, obviously the Board of Selectmen could do the same thing, or any one of the taxpayers who have registered to participate in town meeting could do the same. But I think it is very clear, and historically has always been, the finance committee recommendations that are presented to town meeting.
If I
Lincoln.
could, so I know this was certainly the topic of some conversation last night in the finance committee, and has been the subject of some conversation with between Chairman Anderson and myself. So in looking at the historical information for the last 5 years at town meeting has been presented with an Article 2 that has the requested amount and has the finance committee recommendation also. So 2 columns. And I wanted to go back and look historically several fiscal years to determine, what has been presented to town meeting. That is in concert with the concept, with the law, that the law says that the Board of Selectmen, the exception of petition articles, has the say over what is on the warrant. Board of Selectmen, made the decision about the budget number that is on the warrant. And then further, our Town of Whitman bylaws that speak to the Finance Committee's recommendation in the words of the bylaw being in the margin. So it is a fact that, at least for the last 5 town meetings, that both of those columns have been represented. The requested column in this year's budget represented as the Board of Selectmen proposed budget column, but effectively meaning the same, and the Finance Committee recommendation column. Further, I did have a conversation because I wanted with town council today, because I wanted to make sure that, that my interpretation of that is in concert with the law. And he agreed to that. He agreed that, yes, that is absolutely the case regarding the number in the warrant being that decided upon by the Board of Selectmen and their role as the, as sort of the owners of the warrant, so to speak. And then obviously our bylaws speaking to the Finance Committee recommended column. So that historically has been the case that both columns have been represented.
Rick,
And I may add, with all due respect to our interpretation by our town administrator, the law is very specific that in the absence of a finance committee, the Board of Selectmen can present a recommended budget to town meeting. I think that the town has been fortunate to have the independent review of a finance committee with respect to budgets that have been presented over the past, exceeding the last 5 years. And I want to say that the process has been successful. I mean, but at the end of the day, as Selectman Lamatina has mentioned, it is the will of the voters that eventually decides where we go and where we spend our money. So, but again, I want to make it clear that the discussions that I've had to date with our town administrator, there has been quite a push, I guess, on Mr. Heineman's part to have a budget from the Board of Selectmen be presented to town meeting. And I think with Selectman Evans, we had a discussion at Town Hall a couple of weeks ago. And the way I interpret it is a little more simply, that the budget is prepared in a way that includes the town administrator, the Board of Selectmen, and eventually it goes to the Board of Selectmen for approval. It is their budget. At the point where the Finance Committee makes recommendations, it then becomes the Finance Committee recommendations that are brought to the voters. And that Selectmen column has always gone away. Justin, is that the conversation? Do you remember that we had?
Yeah,
a couple
so
weeks ago?
thanks, Mr. Chairman, if I could be recognized. That is the conversation we had. I think we're a little hung up on exactly how it's printed because, Rick, Randy, and a couple years back, Dan, you were on the Finance Committee as well. We'll remember that most years the requested budget ends up being that collaboration between the department head, the town administrator, the Board of Selectmen, and that is what gets voted on by the Finance Committee, and then their Finance Committee recommendation is printed alongside the requested budget. This year, I don't think we amended the requested budgets down as we reached a balanced budget. We added extra columns for Selectmen, town administrator recommended budgets that are balanced, and I think we're a little hung up there. It really the requested budget from the department heads. We should department head buy-in on a balanced budget as well. So I don't miss that step. But yeah, traditionally the town moderator goes through the Finance Committee's recommended lines as we go down. And I think particularly on this issue with non-mandated busing, it's been coming up the last couple of years. It might be time to bring this to town meeting again. It was a huge, I've been told it was a huge issue at town meeting in the early 90s. Probably worth at least putting the impetus back on the schools to have them explain again why the costs are increasing, what's going on here. Although I do ultimately believe either a member of the Board of Selectmen or a member of the school committee will vote to it on town hall or the floor of the field at the high school to amend it back up to the requested line to fully fund that item. I think it's probably worth a full explanation of why these costs are increasing and what the school will do in the future to mitigate it.
thank you, Justin. Anyone else? Seems like we're at some kind of an impasse here. I'm not sure whether the disagreement is as thin and as close as Justin thinks. It seems to be, I've always assumed that the reason why we do get signatures of the selectmen for the warrant is because it was their warrant. We don't see, we don't pass a budget to the town meeting with the signatures of the finance committee on it, but we have a finance committee recommendation. The recommendation can be pro what the selectmen chooses their budget, or it can be anti. And then the town does vote on it. It's going to be, there's going to be a vote. But I think that it's discussion about whose budget it is a discussion that really doesn't go anywhere. We have a warrant that's been signed by the selectmen. Finance committee finds one item on that budget that it disagrees with. The town is going to know that it disagrees with it because it reads the recommendation of the finance committee, and the town votes. Simple. Rick.
I agree, Mr. Chairman. I do think we're getting hung up a little too much on it.
Yeah,
I would suggest that for the purpose of preparation for town meeting, it might be a good idea just to go back and look at past presentations of warrants and Article 2s that have been presented to town meeting for consideration. I think you will find that all of them include the recommendation of the Finance Committee as to how the town votes on each specific line within Article 2. So again, I certainly defer to the board. I think this is a discussion that we still need to have. I think, I really am concerned that we're moving in a direction that takes away the independent review of the Finance Committee. If in fact we don't use Finance Committee recommendations at town meeting. So that's my own opinion, but it seemed to be the consensus of the board at the meeting last night when we had this discussion. So I don't propose to say that this is the end of the conversation. I do want to say though, Mr. Chairman, with respect to the warrant, there is one warrant article that we neglected to act on last night. We did vote recommendations on 39 of the 40 warrant articles. And I don't know if our town administrator has made the board aware that there was some concern with Article 40, which, if you recall, was the article for the cell tower proposal that was going to go before town meeting. So in the discussion with the Finance Committee 2 weeks ago, I believe, it might even been 3 weeks ago, when we were voting recommendations on the warrant, there was concern as to its location. And I don't know if everybody's familiar with where the parcel is for this specific cell tower proposal, but the abutter, as the board discussed slightly in its meeting when it was recommending action on this, the abutter is Bear Meadow. So my concern, and it is now the concern of the Finance Committee, is not necessarily the justification for having an additional cell tower, but it is limiting its consideration to this one parcel, and the environmental aspects of its location are something that the board was really not made aware of when it was presented at the Board of Selectmen meeting. So I just wanted to, we have not voted final recommendation on this warrant article.
And in what sense does your discussion that you just gave deal with the financial implications of that cell tower?
Well, the financial implications of the cell tower, obviously, it is going to have the potential to generate some income, which obviously is in the purview of the Finance Committee. However, I think the board recognizes that not all financial benefits come without costs. So I think it really was the discussion, and again, no votes were taken regarding Article 40. But the discussion included the possibility that the Board of Selectmen do a little bit more research to identify potential other locations for a cell tower without committing town meeting to this one parcel. That's simply the discussion that we had. Just wanted to make the board aware, that's all.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Does anyone else have anything you'd like to say on this topic? Randy?
I mean, Lincoln, as far as I know, there's no monetary implication, just to confirm, with that cell tower article, correct?
There's no direct budgetation. I mean, so Chairman Anderson's correct, right? So that this would be the potential of a lease of town property, which would obviously generate some revenue. What amount of revenue, we don't know, but to the extent that revenue would occur, that would be the only financial implication.
Right, and that would be more in the purview of a policy board, i.e. the selectmen, maybe even the planning board and the zoning board.
So absolutely. And I know, I think we had this conversation before, but I just want to explain a little bit more what that article would allow if it was approved by town meeting. So state law, so this is a parcel that has been identified by a developer of cell towers as a viable possibility for a cell tower, as far as technically it goes. It is on a sewer pump station, a property that has a pump station that's obviously owned by the town and surrounded, as Chairman Anderson said, by other town-owned land down through Bear Meadow. What state law disallows a contract, in this case, it would be a lease of longer than 3 years without the approval of town meeting. So these came to my attention very recently. This entity that had identified this as a viable location for a cell tower, a possible cell tower, it come to my attention and asked to do that. So I brought it forward to for consideration on the warrant, because of course that may not have the opportunity to come before town meeting for a year, perhaps, if perhaps there is no fall town meeting, but certainly, probably 6 months or so if there was a fall town meeting. So what that article would do, if approved by town meeting, would allow the very first step in the process of the possibility of a cell tower there, because a typical cell tower lease is 12 years, sometimes longer, but this article would specify 12 years. That would be the very first step in the process. The next step in the process, if it was to go anywhere after that, which it may not go anywhere, would be for the Board of Selectmen to consider whether or not it even wanted to issue an RFP to various different companies to determine if a lease was even desirable. That's step one. If the board did decide to issue that RFP, presumably we would get responses, not only from the company that's identified as a viable site, but others. Those would be identified, those would be graded, not only in terms of quality, but also in terms of the revenue that might be a possibility. In doing some more research on this over the past week, we could expect for this type of tower in communities, similar communities have seen the possibility of between about $36,000 to $50,000 in revenue yearly for that type of cell tower. Then the board could decide, whether or not it would want to accept any of these lease proposals or none of them. If at that time, there was a decision to accept one of them, then and only then would that winning bidder need to go through the Zoning Board of Appeals. The Zoning Board of Appeals would need to approve any cell tower through a special permit process, or disapprove any cell tower through a special permit process. And then if it was approved through that, the cell tower would presumably be built, right, if the company did it. So this is one of at least 3 places where public input would occur about whether or not this cell tower would ever be built or even considered. So just to clarify.
Thank you, Lincoln. That's an important clarification that you just made. Is there anyone on the Board of Selectmen that wants to suggest any alteration in its support for non-mandated busing, which is the topic we were on? Okay, hearing none, I think we'll go forward with our proposal then for non-mandated busing. And what will happen at town meeting is the town meeting will take into account both our proposal and the recommendation of the finance committee. Both of which will be clear at that meeting. That by everybody? Good. Rick, I'd like to thank
Yeah,
you.
just one more wrap up,
Yep.
regarding the warrant article 40. So understandably, that this could have the potential at some point to have financial implications for the town. I am in whole agreement with Selectman Lamatina that we have not got to that point yet. And so at our meeting next week, we are posted for, I will suggest to the finance committee that this isn't a warrant article that needs a recommendation from the finance committee.
Thank you, Rick. That's excellent. Okay, Rick, I want to thank you for coming tonight to fill us in on what's been happening and look forward to the town meeting. But before you leave, you made a comment about how the discussion of non-mandated busing was in the home court of the school system, since it was going to happen at the high school field. I think tonight what we're going to be doing is we're going to be discussing and probably making a decision on, based upon what's been going statewide as far as COVID restrictions are concerned, amend the warrant to move the town meeting to town hall. In the same manner that we've had town meetings at town hall for as long as I can remember. And so it won't exactly be on the home field. Hopefully, we're all going to agree that we bring it back on June 2nd. It will be at town hall. It'll be at night. Probably not, I'm going to guess not at 6 o'clock. There's not a need to worry about daylight leaving. So that's going to be part of the town administrator's agenda later, a little bit later on. But just so
Okay. Thank you very much, Chairman. Mr. Chairman, that news is really good for me. I'm really glad that we're moving into a sense of normalcy and returning to in-person meetings. And I know the entire finance committee is looking forward to the time where we can, together and collaborate jointly with the Board of Selectmen in person. So thank you again for the time. I
you.
appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Rick. Next item on the agenda is it's just a note about there was a proclamation read, the proclamation by the selectmen that was read at the school committee meeting last week, honoring Robert Hayes for his many years of service as chair and as school committee member. Just wanted to remind everyone that Dan read that proclamation at the meeting and did a marvelous job, Dan.
All right, thank you.
Next item on the agenda is to act on the request of William Sharnick to be reappointed to the position of constable for a 3-year term through June 30th, 2024. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Or second? Is there any discussion? Can I hear-
I'm just really quickly allowing Chief Hanlon into the room if there was anything he wanted to say, but see if he's still here.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm here. Sorry, I get disconnected there for a second.
okay. Is there anything you want to say about Mr. Sharnick?
No, sir. He's been on several years now, and no news is good news.
Okay.
So,
Thank you. Thank you. Just another Tim. It's been moved and seconded. We'll go to the vote. Justin?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Ryan?
Yes.
Daniel?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. Setting the meeting schedule for June. We know we have one on June 8th, at which is going to be a dog hearing. Does everyone concur that can be an in-person meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll work out the details of whether it be in the selectman's office or a selectman's room, or whether it would be more safe and appropriate to have it in the town hall, in the auditorium, with enough distancing and all that. But we can go through that later on, but it will be in person. And then for the next meeting, June 22nd, does that make sense?
Okay.
Okay, good. Old business. We did read some proclamations for Barbara White and Mary Calia for their work on the Board of Health last week, just to note that once again. And now it's time for the town administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as one might expect, the primary focus of this is some of the changes in COVID-19 and where we are with response to the pandemic. So to briefly recap what I think a lot of people know about from reading the news, the governor yesterday issued a series of orders regarding COVID-19 and opening up the state. Most importantly, the face covering order and all restrictions on capacity indoors are ending on May 29th. There is some new guidance that'll be coming out on May 29th regarding summer camps. That's something that I've been in close contact with our recreation director, Kathleen Woodward, about how to handle that and how that's going to interface with the park program this summer. It's there will be likely a June 1st sign up deadline, which I know is a little bit different, just so folks are aware for the park program. And actually today, this is the first day that youth 18 and under while playing outdoor sports can play without a mask. The other piece of that is on June 15th, the state of emergency will end. And two of the things that are most relevant to the town and the town business are that outdoor dining licenses, temporary outdoor dining licenses will come to an end at that point. Certainly those who have outdoor dining licenses, temporary outdoor dining licenses, can go through the process with the ABCC, with the Alcoholic Beverages Control Commission at the state, and then through the board if they want to extend those and make those on a more permanent basis. The other primary piece that is affected on June 15th, if not before, is that there's the suspension of certain provisions of the open meeting law, namely meeting in person for all boards, committees, commissions will end, and all unless there's some action by the state legislature, which there may well be, we'll see, all boards, committees, commissions meetings will need to be in person. Just so the board's aware, I think there's been some discussion before my arrival here, just so the board is aware, there is an option for remote meeting policy. And briefly what that means is that the Board of Selectmen would adopt a remote meeting policy if it wished to, which would allow all committees and commissions, boards in town to have certain members at the discretion of the chair of each of those committees dial in remotely, provided that the chair and a quorum of that committee or commission is in the room. So barring any change from the state legislature, obviously the board here has already chosen to meet in person. As the board knows, there's been with the exception of public hearings, all public meetings have been required to be either online or outside if they are in person. So if the board wanted to open that up for other boards, committees, commissions prior to June 15th, I think you'd want to take a vote if that was something that you wanted to do for all their committees. And again, you have this option for remote meeting if you so desire going forward, barring any action from the state legislature. So just wanted to update the board on that. And then the other sort of primary piece with respect directly to COVID, the board made the decision, as the board knows, to open up town hall when the state previously had made that decision when the state reached 50% of state residents fully vaccinated. As of today, we're at 46.1%. So presumably that will be reaching 50% very shortly. My prediction might be Monday. We're certainly ready to open town hall and all town buildings. We have the pieces in place to do that when the board, either following the board's existing policy that's been set with 50% or sooner, per the board's thoughts. I know one last thing on that is that the board had asked the Board of Health to reconsider the possibility of that 50% statewide versus townwide. And the Board of Health actually hasn't met since your last meeting. So that hasn't occurred, but they will be meeting next week. But obviously you could make a, whatever decision you chose regarding opening town buildings. So I think those are kind of the two main decision points in the immediate term about when town hall will open, if there's any change in your existing, we've existed in an existing way laid out, and the in-person meetings of other boards and committees prior to June 15th, if that's something the board wants to allow.
Okay, does anyone have any thoughts? Brian?
I guess I've been thinking about this since the governor said he was going to do this. I'm wondering if we should use the state guidance on this. I mean, he said May 29th, I believe it was really basically all open. I would make a motion, but I would rather discuss it first or get your opinion on it. But I personally would like to see us open up all town buildings on June 1st. I just think it's time. And I think the governor has not taken this lightly. He's been very tight on these regulations throughout this whole pandemic. So I don't think he did this willy-nilly. And I think that maybe we could use his 29th date and I believe the next business day, because that's a holiday weekend, being June 1st, I think, if I don't have the calendar. But to me, it makes some sense. And then we could use these, like our meeting is on the 8th and the town meeting will be on the 2nd. It just seems like everything is falling, excuse me, into place. And to me, it would be a logical date, but I respect the board's opinions on this, so I'll leave it to you folks.
Okay, does anyone have any response to Brian? I think we have okay, go ahead, Justin, and then I have a couple of thoughts.
Sure. I was just going to say there's not really a meaningful difference between like 48% and 50% for vaccinations if we're tracking that as our metric. We're pretty much there. The governor's got reopening procedures in place. Anyone who's been vaccinated as of the 29th won't have to wear a mask out, unless we set a different policy, but generally out and about. I tend to agree with Brian here that if we don't hit 50% prior to the 29th, it's probably time to open. And that being said, probably all town buildings, not the phased approach we'd initially planned. It would be, I think, kind of strange to leave the senior center closed when they're the more protected population in the current circumstances.
Right.
I agree.
Okay, why don't I'll ask for a motion then to use the June 1st date for opening all the buildings.
Okay, I'd make that motion that we use June 1st as a reopening date and barring any new information.
Okay, excellent, excellent. Is there a second to that?
I'll second that, Dan.
Is there any further discussion? I think it's pretty clear. Okay, Justin?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. Now, along with that, we need to have a motion as far as changing our town warrant, because the one that we have had ready for signature has as its date June 2nd, but has its place Whitman Hanson High School.
And the time.
I think what we need to do is to formally say that the place is going to be Whitman Town Hall, and on June 2nd. I'm going to recommend that we do it that we have the meeting at 7:30 rather than at 6. That's the time where we've always had our meetings at 7:30. It gives people time to get there, have dinner after they get home from work, and we're not worried about the light leaving because we'll be inside. I think we have to take have some thought about how the inside is constructed. I don't think it should look exactly like it looked the last time we met inside. I think there ought to be some spacing between chairs and all of that, but I think we can work on that between now and then. But I think the motion that we need is to amend our warrant to say that it's going to be June 2nd. I'll suggest at 7:30 in the town hall.
I'll make that motion, Dan.
I'll second that. I do have a question.
So, all right, go ahead,
Okay.
Brian.
Well, we
Um,
have a motion in a second. Now it's time for discussion. Very good.
The legal ramifications on this
Yeah.
change or with the time frame is, is there any opinion by town council on this?
No, we're well within the period, since we're just having an annual town meeting, and rather than officially a special town meeting, the warrant simply needs to be posted at least 1 week before the meeting. So the very last date on which it would need to be posted would be May 26th. But obviously, it'll be posted this week if the board's fine with that.
Great. Thank you.
We need to get in and sign it.
That's right. You do, Dan.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Anyone else? Okay, hearing nothing. Justin?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes. So now, thank you for making me not be a liar to Rick Anderson when he was here saying that we were going to change the venue. It's as far as I know, that exhausts the agenda.
If I could, Mr. very briefly, I just want to mention 2 other quick things. I'm going to assume, unless I hear otherwise, that the June 1st reopening date as adopted by the board also means that is the date on which all committees, commissions, boards can meet in person inside, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
And in addition, I just want to note that the electronic voting devices, if the board recalls for town meeting, if the board recalls last year, that those were not possible at the field, because technically speaking. I did, in preparation when we were thinking that the town meeting was going to be outside, I did check in with the town clerk and the town moderator and Josh McNeil, the IT director, about that, something that we don't want to do, correct? When we're doing it outside. At this date, we are just past the time now from doing them inside that we would not be able to have them inside at this time, because we would have had to tell the company earlier. So I just wanted the board to be aware of that we will not have access to electronic voting devices at town meeting on June 2nd inside of the town hall auditorium. That's it.
Thank you, Lincoln.
And very briefly, I just wanted to let the board know, just 2 other very quick things, not related to COVID, but wanted to just put them in there in the town administrator's report. Number 1 is that the old Regal Shoe Building, 356 South Avenue, and it's 2 different current owners, and 66 Pond Street, which is just to the east of Hobart Pond. 2 large sites zoned industrial. It's recently come to my attention that they're on the market. There has been just this morning and very recently, there has been outreach from potential buyers to me and to Bob Curran, our building inspector, about what possibly could occur with those properties. Currently, the answer is they're zoned industrial. They would need to be an industrial property unless there was some type of zoning relief from the Zoning Board of Appeals or, some other entity as far as zoning relief. But I just wanted the board to be aware of that those 2 properties are, obviously significant in town. They are up for sale. There's certainly interest from possible purchasers. So I just wanted the board to be aware of that. And the other thing is we'd had a conversation regarding the middle school building project, and that owner's project manager process was scheduled to go forward at the school's request. That is put off a little bit longer, and the current plan is that the request for proposals for the owner's project manager would go out on the street for proposals from possible owners, project managers in July. So I just wanted to give the board those two updates.
Thank you, Lincoln.
Thank you.
I'd like a vote now to move into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, under Exception 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel. And under Exception 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body, and the chair so declares.
Motion.
Second.
Is there a second? Okay, voice vote,
Yes.
Justin,
Yes.
Andy,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Dan, and I'll vote yes. In accordance with Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20, executive session will be held in an online conference mode hosted on zoom.com, and members of the public will not be able to physically attend. No broadcast of executive session will be made, and we'll be adjourning, we'll be coming out of executive session only to adjourn. Thank you. And Justin, do your magic now. And
Or pause the recording.
So moved.
Second.
okay, Dan,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Randy,
Yes.
Justin,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. We are out.
Okay.
We
Good night,
go.
folks. Thank you.